Hi everybody, I'm Jamie. Welcome to week 12. I always like to recap last week's games at a glance, talk through some waiver wire pickups, and then wrap things up with my pick'ems and DFS plays for this week's games. So let's dive into some highlights from last week. AFC South and the NFC East are two divisions I've definitely got my eye on. The Colts getting a much needed win against the Jaguars, taking on Nick Foles in his debut. So 2 touchdowns and almost 300 yards, not enough to get the job done for the Jags. Big story for the Colts, losing Marlon Mack early with the hand injury. He's out for the foreseeable future, so we'll talk through some waiver wire pickups. It was definitely next man up mentality there. Jonathan Williams having a big game, but they also have Jordan Wilkins coming back from injury this week. As I said, big win for the Cowboys. Zeke getting into the end zone, and Zeke being very balanced, I think. He's been good all year, actually. Better than I ever thought he would be. Honestly, I didn't know that he could put the ball in the end zone and light it up like he has. So I think that's the balance they've been needing in that offense. He's been leveraging his weapons a lot better than he's ever done in the past. Zeke's been getting a little bit of heat for not running the ball that hard, but I actually don't know that he's had to. I think that's a good thing. They've been too reliant upon him to run that offense, and I think that's been a detriment for them. So I think with how balanced they've been, they're going to be a lot more competitive this year, and I think that one's going to be a good fight to the finish. Ravens absolutely shellacked the Texans. The Texans looked awful to me. Underperformance for them. They take on the Colts this week. That's going to be one of the games of the week for me. I think that the Texans will bounce back and actually have a better game, but I just thought they looked awful against the Ravens. We know the Ravens are a good team, but nonetheless, putting 7 points on the board, not a good showing. The 49ers are rolling. They look great. Big performance from Deebo Samuel. That was a standout for me in that game, and big game from Jimmy Garoppolo. Comeback of the week has to be the Vikings, without a doubt. Like, comeback of years, really. And I was surprised that the Broncos put that many points on the board. And the question is, how many quarterbacks with the last name Allen can we find? 3 and counting. But nonetheless, the NFC North, very competitive. NFC West, very competitive. And the AFC East also looking pretty solid if the Bills can keep it up. I also want to highlight some very, very important football news. I want to give an award, and it's a tie for the best touchdown dance. So, got to go to the Colts for their keg stand. Now, I don't know how great their form was. Thankfully, we're not measuring on that. We're talking about intent, pure intent, solid performance on the keg stand celebration, and then Zeke for imitating Dak Prescott. So, solid performances there. And I also want to give a celebrity shot award to Julian Edelman. I really appreciated the touchdown. I was actually going against Tom Brady, fun story. And I was like, you know what? If Julian Edelman catches a touchdown and that's the only touchdown that Tom Brady throws, that's fine. But the only touchdown that was thrown was not by Tom Brady, which was amazing. So if you had Julian Edelman, I'm sure you enjoyed that too. Let's talk through some waiver wire options. Nick Foles, 30% owned. He's the top of my list. 2 touchdowns, 296 yards, 1 interception. And, I think that they are going to be fighting back in a lot of games this year. And Nick Foles, I think, has some very serviceable weapons that he can leverage. He's going to, I think, give them a little bit of firepower that they haven't had all year. Jacoby Brissett is also, I think, a close second there. He's 39% owned in many leagues, and he's been very solid all year long that he's played. If none of those options are available, I like Ryan Tannehill and Sam Darnold too. So they're probably my third-tier options there. Running back-wise, obviously at the top of many people's lists are going to be Jonathan Williams and Jordan Wilkins. Here's the thing. Jordan Wilkins has been their number 2 running back all year long. He's gotten a lot more carries than Jonathan Williams has. Although in Jonathan Williams' debut, we'll call it performance this past week, 14 carries, 109 yards. Definitely not something to bat an eye at, or definitely something to bat an eye at, I guess. I don't know how that works. But nonetheless, Jordan Wilkins did return to practice this week. So it's going to be a tough call on who's going to be the option there. Jordan Wilkins has had more carries this past year, and he is also coming back from injury. Jonathan Williams might get an option to take the driver's seat here, so we'll see. Another decent option could be Bo Scarborough. The Lions' running game has been pretty atrocious all year long. He's 3% owned. He had 14 carries for 55 yards and a touchdown. So a decent performance. Ty Johnson has been pretty bad. J.D. McKissick has shown that he's probably going to be more of a PPR option. So Bo Scarborough could be an interesting play. Probably not somebody that you feel comfortable starting unless you absolutely have to, or you got some pretty, bad injuries on your team. Another option is Chris Thompson. He has been out for quite a few weeks, but could be a solid PPR option if you are in a PPR league. Wide receiver wise, Randall Cobb is at the top of my list. He's actually had, I didn't know whether this was kind of like an anomaly with him, but it's nice to see him back to his old self and getting some solid target share. He did drop a few balls this past week, which is concerning. He's 15% owned, but back-to-back 100-yard performances from him and some solid target share. So if Dak keeps throwing the ball like that, I actually wouldn't, if I had to start Randall Cobb, wouldn't feel bad about it. Another option, Chris Conley, a little bit more. Actually, I like Deebo Samuel before I like Chris Conley. Deebo Samuel, 8 for 10, 134 yards, even with Emmanuel Sanders out there. Emmanuel Sanders a little bit banged up, but he's been consistent. So I do like Deebo Samuel. I also like Chris Conley a little bit. He's more of like a perimeter guy for me right now. A long shot, 6 for 8, 50 yards. So with Nick Foles back there, he can gun it. It's just going to be a question of who he's going to throw the ball to. He's got a lot of targets. Darius Slayton, he's been very solid. And at this point, Sterling Shepard, it just doesn't, I don't even know whether he's going to come back. It's questionable, especially with a concussion. And I think it might be tough for him to work his way in at this point. Darius Slayton has been very solid, 10 for 14, 121 yards and 2 touchdowns. Pretty impressive performance. He outperformed Golden Tate. So we do have Evan Ingram potentially coming back this week or next week. That could definitely make an impact, but he's been a solid staple in that offense. So a decent option, Darius Slayton. I like him too. I think he's about 25% owned at this point. Tight end wise, really like Jacob Hollister. He's had back-to-back solid performances. I also like Ryan Griffin. Chris Herndon went on IR, so it looks like Ryan Griffin is going to be the option moving forward. Defenses, if you are streaming any defenses, I like Denver versus the Bills are 20% owned. I also like the Giants as a long shot against the Bears. Who knows what the heck's going on with the Bears right now? Oh, man. Poor Mitchell Trubisky. But then again, I also don't blame him. 7 points, not enough to win the game. But, tough to take somebody out in a rhythm. But, I don't know. I think the Giants could blank them. They're coming off a really rough loss. Colts against the Texans, they're 37% owned, but could be interesting coming off of their performance. We'll see. And the Colts defense has actually been decent. So let's get to some pick'ems. I have the Colts beating the Texans, going against the grain there. Texans are at home. I also have the Falcons at home beating the Bucks. I've got the Broncos beating the Bills, pulling an upset there. I just don't know that the Bills are that great, but they're decent. I've got the Giants beating the Bears, so going against the grain there. The Bears are at home, but I just don't know if they're going to recover after last week. It was bad. I've got the Bengals pulling an upset against the Steelers, divisional game there. So the Bengals have looked better. Joe Mixon's looked better, so I think that's promising for them. And, I don't know whether A.J. Green's ever going to come back. We'll see. Browns, I've got them beating the Dolphins at home. I've got the Saints beating the Panthers at home. What happened to the Panthers this week? Jeez. I've got the Jets at home beating the Raiders, going against the grain there. I've also got the Seahawks beating the Eagles. The Eagles are favored. The Eagles are at home, I guess. That's probably why. But the Seahawks have been very, very solid all year. I've got the Lions beating the Redskins. The Redskins are at home there. I've got the Jags beating the Titans, who are at home. So I'm going against the grain there. I think Nick Foles is going to light it up. But that's going to be an interesting game. Ryan Tannehill's backup. Nick Foles kind of feels like a backup at this point. Patriots, I've got them beating the Cowboys at home. And then the Niners, I've got them beating the Packers at home. That one's going to be another great game to watch. I've also got the Ravens. I'm going against the grain, taking the Ravens against the Rams at home, who arguably are at home. St. Louis is their home. Let's get real, people. Sorry for any of you LA people. DFS, I like Jeff Driscoll. I went dumpster diving on my matchups. I got Jeff Driscoll and Marvin Jones, who's really been lighting it up all year. He's been consistent. He's got 8 touchdowns, and he's actually never scored in consecutive games this year. I think this week is the exception. He scored last week. So I think this is the week that he scores in consecutive games. Marvin Jones is 6,100. I've got Nick Foles, too, at 5,400, and DJ Chark. DJ Chark has been pretty decent all year long. I've been impressed with him. He had 15 targets last week with Nick Foles, so that says a lot. Even if that takes a dip down, I still like his odds. He's 6,400. Other wide receivers, DJ Moore has been pretty impressive for me. Some good target share. He's had an average of 8 targets in his last 3 games. with 100 yards in, I think, each of his games. But he's only had 1 touchdown, like, all year, I think. So I like his odds. He's had 100 yards 2 out of his last 3 games. Sorry. So he's only had 1 touchdown. I like his odds to get in the end zone this week. I also like Devontae Parker. He's been on a solid pace with Ryan Fitzpatrick since Preston Williams has been hurt. I like Randall Cobb at 4,800. So I kind of went on the lower end on those with Devontae Parker and Randall Cobb. Tight end wise, I like Jacob Hollister. I like Ryan Griffin, and I like Greg Olsen, who's been seeing an uptick in performance. Zach Ertz has been good too as of recent, so I don't hate him as an option. Running back wise, Josh Jacobs has been reliable, I think, all year. He's been consistent, getting some solid receptions as well as some very impressive run game. Le'Veon Bell, I like him this week at 6,400. I like Kalen Ballage at 4,400. Mark Walton obviously getting waived, I think could mean some, better production from him. We'll see, or at least a better option. But he's cheap. I don't hate that. Pat's at 3,300 seems like a steal for me, especially when the Lions are going for 3,100. I don't hate the Lions either at 3,100. I went dumpster diving for the Broncos at 2,400. They could be interesting. So anyway, that's the week at a glance. Thank you for tuning in. Sorry for the lightning round if I talked a little fast. But anyway, it's a lot to get through. Feel free to comment if there's something that you'd like to see. Feel free to follow me at fantasy_more. If you want to see more best touchdown dance awards of the week, I'm happy to throw those in there too. So anyway, have a great week, everybody. Good luck in your fantasy football.